Today we're going to be reviewing the Buck Stockman's pattern, but first a point of clarification. The Stockman type is a noun actually for a three-blade type of knife that came to us out of the 1870s, 80s when America was far more rural than it is now, and we'll discuss that in greater detail. The Stockman was one of the most popular knives for carry long before the tactical lockback folder craze and before a pocket clip became man bling. Buck started offering this version, we have one here, started in the 1970s, and after some early tumult, Buck has greatly improved this product and its construction, and it's, in my opinion, one of the best constructed Stockman patterns we have for us today. It originally came in three sizes. There was a Wrangler size, which was about 4 inches in length, and the present Stockman size, which is 3 7/8, and then a smaller version, the Cadet. There was, to give you some brief evolution as to how the Stockman's pattern came about. It was, as I said, used in rural America and just was sold well all over the country. The first and primary blade is what they call a long clip blade. It was just for general purposes. You kept it good and sharp for everything. The second blade was called a sheep's foot. And it's not for the shape, but if you had sheep on pasture, and many times they would need a pedicure. And if you're into animal science, we can talk more about that later. But it was named for this, and it evolved into the knife blade that got used for the abusive things. Presently, the sheep's foot is the one that people use for a wire stripper or a box ripper or things of that sort. And so as a consequence, it took a lot of abuse. Now, the third blade in the pattern here is what they call the spaying blade, which was used for castrating livestock. And tradition held that this one would be reserved for the finest of work and would be sharpened the finest of all the three blades. And so it was also, there's some variations of this. Sometimes they come with a leather punch or what they call a pen blade now. So we need to discuss something here as Buck progressed. Back in 2011, the late Chuck Buck was at the Bass Pro Shops here in Rancho Cucamonga, California, and he was just doing some PR, talking to the public, autographing knives and whatnot, and I had the privilege of catching him when there was no one else in line, so two of my cohorts and I had a rare opportunity to talk to him at length about some of what we're talking about right now. This specimen here was manufactured in the late 70s, and when I showed it to Mr. Buck, he said, oh, that's one of what they call the black springs, because these are the carbon steel and they were indeed black. He said those were outsourced, and he said, quote, before we knew how to make them ourselves. And this history is well documented in such sources as Blade Magazine, also the Buck Collectors Club website. And so there was some changes in the construction that you can see. This specimen here was a special run that was available through Smoky Mountain Knife Works, and it was manufactured in about 1988. And this represents a transitional time period, other than the stag handle here. At that time, Buck had switched from the 440C stainless, though there was some dispute whether it was 440C or 440A or B, name your poison. But these, by this point, for sure, Buck was using the 425M. Also, they started to change it in that right along in here, they added an extra liner material on this side here, whereas this was not the case on the previous manufacturer. Secondly, but they did keep the same general blade configuration and pattern. Now, one of the characteristics of the Stockman was the placements of the blades. Is the pen blade or spay blade typically laid along here, and the sheep foot laid along here, and so these would mesh correctly. Typically, the sheep's foot, and maybe kind of difficult to see there, was canted in a little bit. It was tilted in this direction. So later on in, I don't have the exact date, but in Buck's current production, they have gone to keeping the clip blade in the same position, but they moved the sheep's foot down to the other end. Instead, they've swapped the ends, and then what they did is they put a solid bolster, and it's not layered. It's a solid bolster that's solid with the lining, and the lining is nickel silver, and it's the bolster and the liner in one piece. And this is a spring for the clip blade. This is a spring for the sheep's foot, and then here's a spring for the spade blade. So basically, the sheep's foot is surrounded by 3 pieces of steel. So for the blade that is typically the blade that is mistreated in this format is given, basically it's surrounded by steel, so we can go to stripping wire and cutting boxes and doing all the other heinous immoral things that you would do to a knife. It is most rigidly supported. Secondly, the pattern is also available in different handle inserts depending upon Buck's women fancy, but this is the one that's currently available. They also make a hardwood model. This is my second copy of this. I had one that was manufactured in 2012. It had the yellow handle, and it disappeared in the wilds of the mountains of Wrightwood, California, and we haven't found it. In that particular variation, I didn't find any massive craftsmanship flaws. There are folk that have said these are very shoddily prepared. This is not the case. This one here is perfectly sound, no rattles, no major gaps or so forth. And in my opinion, with this improvement of the 3 springs in there, it makes for a very rigid knife. And I would highly recommend it if you enjoy the Stockman's pattern. And this particular model is definitely made for use and carry, and it is very similar in some respects. Case makes a series of black plastic handles, and they sell it as a workman's product. They don't sell it as a collector piece or anything. It's just to be carried for work. So another matter that we're going to address in a future posting is that there's been constant rumor about the older 440C blades maintain a better edge than the present production, and that the 425s weren't any good, and the present ones are, so forth and so on. What we've done is we have designed a edge holding test with these 3 knives. This one's from the late 70s, this is from 1988, and this is current production. Presently, Buck has gone to a hollow grind, and some of these are kind of coarse. I will admit that up front. Oh, but one thing about it, the edge that comes on these things is pretty good. But any knife nut might want to edge them up on their favorite implement. So at any rate, we hope that you enjoyed this posting, and we can recommend with a clear conscience the Buck Stockman with some minor caveats about kind of a rough hollow grind. Thank you and goodbye.